My name is Jon Bombaci. I'm the founder of Candor Realty. I get the question all the time, why did you create Candor Realty? And I normally kind of try to assess how much time I have to explain my story, because I could either make it really short or make it really long. That said, I got time today to ramble, so hold on. We're going to go through the story. Just to give you a little perspective, so right now I'm sitting here in 2025. We have about 60 agents on the team across 3 states. We're in the process of expanding to 2 more states. We have about 1,000 units under management, and we did about $180 million in revenue last year. And so we've grown exponentially. We started this in 2020, so it's essentially been 5 years. I didn't know what I was doing more than half at the time. It just ended up being something where you get the right people in the right seats and you find the right community, and everything just starts to make sense. My story begins back in 2010 when I graduated from college. And so I graduated from a state school. I went to Framingham State. I graduated with a finance degree, and I knew everything, more than anybody could imagine, about every topic related to finance, because I had this finance degree. I got a job at a Fortune 100 company making decent income, and I went to get pre-approval for a loan because renting, didn't want to rent. I wanted to own something. That's how I was brought up to think. And so I went to get pre-approval, and they told me I had too much debt. I had student loan debt. I had a new finance car. I got pre-approved for $100,000, which in Connecticut in 2010, you could actually find some really shitty condos for $100,000. And so went and looked at some really shitty condos. And I was like, this isn't going to work. My grandmother, who was a small-time property owner, she had about 6 units at the time, told me that you could qualify for more money if you were willing to buy a multifamily. And I thought that was weird, but I didn't understand the logic behind it. And so I talked to the bank, and they said, yeah, if you want to buy a 3-family, you could be approved up to $250,000. I was like, okay. So I went and looked at a couple of 3-families. I found one for $195,000, and the vacant unit was a 4-bedroom unit that was in much better shape than all the shitty condos I was looking at. And the bank said I could buy it. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'll do this. That works. It solves my need of wanting to buy something instead of renting. I had 2 tenants on the lower floor, and I was living in the 4-bedroom upstairs. I closed on it in 2011 and then just kind of lived in it. Over a couple of years, the tenants on the first floor moved out. I was able to update them, increase the rent. My brother graduated from college and moved in with me, started throwing me $500 a month for utilities and the bills. And then all of a sudden, my student loan debt was disappearing. My car loan was paid off. I was maxing out my 401k. And then I was going to after work activities and happy hours with the same people that I graduated with, the same people working the same job as me. And I was just paying for bar bills. I wasn't thinking anything about it. But they were watching their spending. They were still saving. They were still paying off their student loans. They were still worried about where all this money was going. And that's when I realized that I'd been living for free in this 3-family for 5 years, and I'd been able to use all of my income to dispose of debt and save. And I was like, that's awesome. Nice job. I invented something. A quick Google search turned out people do this all the time intentionally. I just stumbled into it like an idiot, but it worked out well for me at that time. When I got engaged and was getting married and moved from Connecticut to Massachusetts, I was like, well, I don't want to go from paying none of my mortgage to paying all my mortgage. And so I bought a 2-family in Kingsborough, Massachusetts with 5% down, and I went to pay half my mortgage. And I was like, that's great, that works. I was commuting about 3 hours a day to Boston, and that was fine when I was young without kids. But then I lost my father to cancer when he was young, and that all kind of happened around the same time. I spent 3 hours on the bus to Boston one day. And I was like, I can't do this. This isn't going to work long term. This isn't the life that I want to live. I saw my father struggle with cancer. I saw my father go through the ups and downs. And I was like, I don't want to be that person at 60 years old. And so started looking at my own financial future for the first time. I was listening to Bigger Pockets on the bus. I was listening to Mr. Money Mustache Extreme, or reading the blogs and reading the books. And I was financially literate, but I didn't really look at my own finances. And I realized if I aggressively saved, I could retire from my W-2 in about 15 years, which would have been great. That would have put me at 40 years old. And I was like, that's awesome. And then I was like, well, if I take a little bit of a risk and I jump into real estate and I use leverage, I could retire in 3 years. And that was a very intriguing thought to me. I was reading this book, 4-Hour Workweek, at the time, and there's an exercise in there that's all about what's the perfect life that you envision and what does that look like. And you go through this whole modeling of, traveling for 6 months and doing all these things and putting values to it. And the realization is it actually doesn't cost all that much to live your dream life. We just are constantly thinking we need more, and we always kind of invest money in the wrong places, like into a house that's not really part of your long-term vision. And then part of the exercise flips and it says, all right, if you fail and everything goes wrong, what does your life actually look like? And your thought is living under a bridge, eating trash out of a dumpster. Like, you come up with these unreasonable thoughts. And the idea is, like, that's not really what happens, right? If you quit your job, like, you could go back and get another job in finance in 2 years and you probably get paid more. You get a promotion for it. Worst case scenario, right? You're a barista at Starbucks or you're working at McDonald's. And it's like, yeah, that would suck, but like, that's better than most of the people living in most parts of the world. So like, take the risk. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to take the risk. Jumped into real estate, really focusing on growing the portfolio. We bought 24 units over the course of 18 months in this little town up north called Littleton, New Hampshire. I was able to use some creative financing at the time, leveraging seller credits, leveraging my 401k to buy about $1 million of real estate, 3 separate transactions adding up to 24 units with about $150,000 out of pocket. The day I closed on the 12 unit is the day I walked in my boss's office and gave my 2 weeks notice. They asked me where I was going, think I was going to a competitor. I told them, nope, I'm just retiring. And they're like, okay, well, today's your last day. And so that was July 2019, and that's the last day I worked in corporate finance. Throughout that journey of buying the 24 units, I realized a lot of real estate agents didn't know what the heck they were doing. You had the residential agents, which sold mostly on empathy, and they didn't know anything about investment properties or multifamilies. And then you had the commercial agents that don't get out of bed for anything less than $2 million. They work Monday through Friday from 8 to 4, and like, good luck reaching them outside of that. And so I realized, like, there's this niche of 2 to 20 unit buildings where you need an agent that gets it, an agent that acts like a residential agent and will show you properties on the weekends, but also understands investment properties. So I started Candor Realty in 2019 when I quit the corporate job. And the idea was really to help people with the 2 to 10 unit market. I was going to do it myself and just kind of do, 10-ish transactions a year as my retirement job. I realized pretty quickly that there's a lot of agents in this industry that are holistically unsuccessful residential properties. First agent that joined us, his name was Matt. He was in the industry for like 6 years before me, did a total like 5 transactions. I brought him over, started explaining to him how to work with investors and investment properties. He did 10 transactions in 5 months. And the difference was the flip. Instead of focusing on empathy and selling and trying to convince someone to buy a property, which is really easy for some agents, really hard for a lot of people that are kind of grounded in integrity, all of a sudden you flip the switch where you're working with numbers, you're working with investors, you're working with logic, and it just is a completely different mindset. It's a completely different agent. And so we kind of discovered that I can take investor-focused agents and make them very successful, and we were able to grow off of that. I found through trial and error over the years that I can't take an agent and teach them how to be an investor. It just doesn't work. It's too much of a mind shift. Someone that's used to selling and commissions and hustling, they think being an investor is really hard. They don't have the patience for it. But I can take an investor and I can teach them how to be an agent very easily. So they already made the mind shift to being an investor. They're already willing to do it themselves. And now all of a sudden I can teach them how to help others. And that's how Candor was built. Every agent on our team is an investor-focused agent. They all either own an investment property themselves or make a commitment to buy an investment property within 12 months. And that provides them with integrity. That provides them with experience. They've lived through an eviction. They've lived through the ups and the downs and wanting to get through the W-2. And so they're able to connect with the clients and help them in ways that most agents just don't understand. We don't do sales training. We don't have a sales manager. Everything within our company is focused on how do we help the agents reach financial independence? And then how do we help the agents help clients do the same thing? How do we run numbers? How do we refine our craft and learn from our experience? How do we build a stronger team so that we can go further, but also our agents can go further and our clients can go further with them? And so we've grown like a weed since 2019. We went from 24 units to 32 units, and then I got into syndication a little bit. We were able to help investors that really had no business owning investment properties themselves, which was a discovery through the process of there's a lot of people that want to own real estate for the diversification and the equity and the value, but they either have a high-paying job making $500,000 a year in Boston, they don't have the time for it, or they just don't have the personality for it, right? Like in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, we have very strong tenant laws. Some people can't comprehend with that. And so the idea is we help people invest passively in real estate, where we try to help them deploy into projects that we're working on. We've grown like a weed over the past 6 years. Like I said, we went to about 1,000 units. We have about 60 agents on the team, and it's all grounded in working with investor-focused agents and helping people reach financial security through real estate.